Hi, and welcome to today's live with TLR Now. TLR or Team Leap Roar Now is a provider that provides services for coaching, training, and mentoring. They essentially help you be a better version of you, help you improve and develop your skills. They customize these programs across schools, colleges, universities, corporates, you name it. Um, Today we will be talking about the Bushido Code. I am Rewa. I will be hosting the program today along with John. Welcome, John.
Hi, thank
Um,
you.
Hi, would you like to say a little bit about yourself?
Sure, absolutely. My name is John Godoy. I am an entrepreneur, an inventor, a lifestyle coach, a martial artist, and a professional speaker. And what I do is I blend Eastern wisdom, Western philosophy, and American practicality together to help people develop their most powerful tool, which is themselves. And so what I do is I share with them strategies on how to develop themselves physically, mentally, and spiritually.
Okay. And we're going to be talking about the Bushido Code today. I have read up a little bit about it, and it seems like a really interesting topic. So, could you just start by telling us a little bit about that and how and why you think it's relevant today?
Sure, absolutely, Rob. Before I go into the Bushido Code, it's kind of important, I feel, to share a little bit about my background because
Yeah,
that'll
of
put
course.
it into context. And the reason being is that, well, let me start again. My mother is Japanese and my father is American. And I was born in Canada. And so from the time that I was born, I had the influence of two different cultures at the same time. And when I was a kid, it's a bit challenging because it creates a little bit of a confusion. You don't necessarily know if you belong to one side or the other. However, as I got older, I started to realize that, well, you know what, maybe this isn't such a bad thing because I was able to see my two different cultures at the same time. And so as I got older, I started to think, okay, what is it about each of my cultures that I admire and things that I think if I shared aspects of that culture with the other culture, it could only make that other culture better. And one of those ideas and one of those lessons was the Bushido Code. And it was a historical situation, Bushido is a historical philosophy or ethos that was used by the samurai warriors of ancient Japan as they went through their own time of just great change and uncertainty, right? And so I thought, well, that lesson can be applied over here, well, essentially to the whole world, because we're now going through a tremendous time of uncertainty and change as well. So let me give you a little bit of context. So I want you to imagine that you are a samurai warrior, right? And you live in Japan in 400 years ago. And don't worry, there are female samurai warriors as well. They were called Onabugeisha. And they were just as ferocious, if not more ferocious, than the men. And when you lived in ancient Japan as a samurai, you had two responsibilities. Number one was to become an absolute master at your profession, and that was being a warrior. So you spent your days practicing how to ride horses, sword fighting, all the different weapons to become a great at your profession. And the second thing that you had to do is you had to demonstrate absolute loyalty to your lord. And when I say your lord, that just happened to be the warlord who ran the piece of land that you lived on, called a fief, right? And Japan at this period of its history was full of these fiefs all over the place, just fighting each other all the time. So your world revolved around two things: becoming good at what you do and fighting. However, on October 21st, 1600, there was a big battle, and it was called the Battle of Sekigahara. And during this battle, one of those warlords named Tokugawa Ieyasu, he beat his final rival, the Toyotomi clan. And when he beat them, what he did is he basically unified the whole country. So now there's no more war, there's no more fighting. Japan at this time is a largely isolated island nation. So it has virtually no threat of foreign invasion. So you find yourself a samurai whose whole world has been about fighting. And then there's no more war. It's like if you were a skier, a downhill skier, and someone took away the mountain and your skis. And so the samurai faced a choice. They had no more wars to fight. Their profession was no longer applicable. Their skills were no longer useful, something that like we're all facing today, or many of us are facing today. And so they faced a choice. They could either adapt and go into new professions, learn new skills and new trades, or not adapt and just kind of fade and lose out. And what they chose to do is they chose to adapt, right? And they took on new professions and learned new skills. They became merchants and politicians and craftsmen. And it was to these new professions that they took a fundamental part of who they were with them. And that was their ethos or their principles or their values. And that those values were essentially called the Bushido Code. And what the Bushido Code is 7 universal humanistic principles that teach someone how to lead a good life. And it is those principles which they used as their compass, as like a GPS, essentially, to teach them how to lead a good life. And so they became amazing and excelled in their new professions. And so that's where the Bushido Code comes from. That's the context. That's the big backstory. Would you like to know what the 7 codes are, the 7 principles?
Oh, yes, of course.
Okay. I guess that was your initial question. The first principle of Bushido is called Kennin. It's spelled Kennin. And what that means is to cultivate an indomitable spirit. Cultivate an indomitable spirit. That means to develop resolve, right? To be confident, to have focus on where you want to go. And to illustrate this, one way to kind of think about it is there's days where, given all that's going on, you might wake up in the morning and just feel, I'm just not motivated. I don't know where things are. I feel depressed. The world is upside down. I can't find a job, or my job is uncertain. And no matter how healthy you are, no matter how mentally clear you are, you just feel dejected. You just feel down. And that's because your spirit is just taking a beating. And so it's so important that you cultivate an indomitable spirit. I'd like to give you an example of a situation of indomitable spirit. Are you familiar with the Ironman Triathlon?
Yeah, of course.
Okay. So for people who are not, the Ironman Triathlon is a very challenging ultra endurance event. And it comprises a 2.4-mile swim. I'm sorry, I don't know the conversion to kilometers.
It's fine.
2.4-mile swim, 112-mile bike, and 26.2-mile run, which is a full marathon. And they're all done back to back to back. It's a very challenging race, and it's become very popular all over the world. And every year, the best of the best, they come together in Hawaii for the Ironman World Championships. So I want to take you to Ironman World Championships 1998. And there's these two ladies, and they have tremendous kennin, a tremendous indomitable will. And their goal this year is to win the Ironman Championship in the women's division. One of their names is Cyanne Welch. The other's name is Wendy Ingram. And so in order to make this long story kind of short, they jump in the water, they swim, they get out of the water, they get on their bike, they start riding, and then they start the marathon. And they're getting towards the end of the race. They're doing exceptionally well. They're at the front of the pack. And then eventually, the finish line appears 100 meters away. And then all of a sudden, everything falls apart. Cyanne Welch, who's just slightly in front of her friend Wendy, her beautiful running stride collapses, and she falls to the ground. And then her friend Wendy, literally a few feet behind her, she too collapses to the ground and falls 100 meters from the finish line. Do you know what happened to them? You want to take a guess?
No, I don't know. Did they get tired? What happened?
I'm glad you didn't say that they died, because that would have been a horrible story for me to share.
I did not think of that.
What happened to them is that their bodies completely shut down. There's a term in endurance sport called bonking. And bonking happens when your body runs out of all physical energy. There's nothing left, and it just shuts down so you don't actually die. And so that's what happened to the two women. They had no more physical energy left, and they collapsed. but their goal was 100 meters away. And so a few
Right.
moments passed, and then the two women got onto their hands and knees and began to crawl those 100 meters and to the finish line and into Ironman history.
Right.
And how they were able to do that is because they possessed a tremendous amount of kenning, a tremendous indomitable will to keep moving forward that is there even when we don't have the physical energy, right? Another example might be a woman if their child gets stuck underneath a car. A woman who's never exercised or lifted anything before, they find tremendous strength to be able to lift that over off the car.
Yeah. We've heard many stories like that.
Right. And that's the power of cultivating an indomitable will. And we can all do that by daily reflecting on our goals and our purpose. If we keep our purpose in our mind's eye every single day, it's going to give us much more strength and much more energy to keep going forward. And the samurai knew that.
Okay, yeah, right, of course.
So that is the first principle of Bushido. That is kennin. The second principle of Bushido is called shinen. And shinen, S-H-I-N-N-E-N, means to cultivate a strong sense of self. A strong sense of self. In other words, to develop your self-confidence. To develop your self-confidence. So I want to give you another example, another short story to kind of really illustrate the point. So in university, I was a swimmer and I played water polo. And at that time, I had a hero. And she was a swimmer. And she ended up being one of the United States' greatest Olympic athletes. Her name was Dara Torres. And when she was 16 years old, she won gold at the 1984 Los Angeles Olympic Games. Okay? And that victory gave her the motivation and the self-confidence and the power to dedicate herself to training, to become a master of her chosen occupation, swimming, to become a master of her skill, swimming. And she dedicated thousands upon thousands of hours and miles training. And that paid off because she qualified for 4 more Olympic Games after that.
Wow.
The most being in 2008 in Beijing, China. Can you guess how old she was in Beijing, China? The first Olympics, she was 16, 1984. And the second one, and the last one was in 2008 in Beijing, China.
But if she's qualified for 4 Olympics, so she's about 16 years older than when she was, right? 32? Yeah.
Well, she was 41 years old.
What? What?
41 years old, yeah, at the Beijing Olympics. To put that into perspective, the average age of a female Olympic swimmer in the sport of swimming is 20, half her age.
That's, wow.
So when she qualified for those Olympics, the critics, obviously they came out and said, you're too old. You know, many critics can, but Dara's shinen was so strong, right? Her sense of self was so strong is because she had trained, she had mastered her skills, she had developed herself, that she ignored those critics. And then the critics said, well, you're not going to win a single medal. They were right. She didn't win a single medal. She won 3 more Olympic medals.
Wow.
Games, bringing it to a lifetime total of 12. But she did 2 more important things during those games. Number 1, she made the critics be quiet, or the trolls, as they say now.
Yeah.
And number 2, she inspired every person over 35 that even after that age, you can still compete at the highest levels. And what she teaches us is it's the power of dedication to mastery of our skills, right? Of our tools, because that gives us the self-confidence to be able to navigate through uncertain times, right? And we do that by identifying the skills that we currently have, and we keep honing them during these times of trouble, right? We keep getting them better and better and better. And then at the same time, we also look at what other skills do I need? And then we focus on developing those as well. So if you're a highly technical person, like a lot of people in India are, then I challenge you to start learning softer skills. Learn how to communicate using Zoom or modalities like StreamYard and all these other tools where you learn to communicate your expertise. And if you're a soft skill person, It's the opposite,
The other
right?
way. Yeah, of course. Like, I mean, something similar to what you're talking about, I've been facing currently, just because I've recently quit my job and I've been sitting at home, and, we're kind of in lockdown and in quarantine, as people are calling it. Um, and I kind of, just to keep myself sane, have been doing a lot of things to occupy myself. They don't necessarily classify as, I wouldn't say like they're productive in the ideal way of them, but just doing new things and keeping myself busy. So I've started editing videos for my mom. I've started filming my own videos and editing them, and this was something I did not know how to do 2 months ago. I wouldn't be able to edit 2 months ago, and today I think I am, just by doing like 5 videos, I feel so much better about myself because I've been able to learn something on my own, while I'm sitting at home, and just because I had to. So
Absolutely.
yeah.
Absolutely. That's very powerful. Here in the United States, we have a lot of people who do what's called Netflix and chill, which basically means watch movies and
I've,
relax.
yeah, I've been doing that as well, but there's a balance that you need to create.
Right. I definitely agree with the balance. I challenge you. I challenge people to use this opportunity to completely transform their life, to one that they envision for themselves. The third principle, let's jump into that one, is called Shincho, which is actually, it's a nice segue to Shincho. Shincho. And Shincho means to exhibit good judgment, to have good judgment. I'm going to give you another kind of a story to illustrate this point. I used to work in the Dominican Republic. Are you familiar with the Dominican Republic?
Yeah.
It's one of those Caribbean countries. It's a beautiful Caribbean country out over here on this side of the world. And I was working at a baseball academy as a strength coach. And this is where I met a young man named Bienvenido. And Bienvenido was about 15 years old at the time that I met him. He was tall, darker in complexion, very skinny, and he possessed the gaze of someone who'd seen a lot of hardship in his life. But Bienvenido was able to take a baseball with his left hand and throw it over 90 miles an hour over and over and over again, which in baseball, very powerful skill to have.
Yeah.
But what's interesting about him is that he was also illiterate and he was born poor, right?
Okay.
And the Dominican Republic is one of those countries in the world where if you're born poor, chances are you're going to die poor. The chances to change your circumstances in life isn't very high. Baseball is one of those few opportunities, although the probability is so very small. But that was his hope. Go ahead.
I feel like that's a similar situation, I would say, in a lot of parts of India as well.
Yes. Yeah. I'm sure it's something that goes on global, right? There's opportunities for some people and not as much opportunity.
Yeah.
Right. So with Bienvenido, one day he was playing pickup baseball on a dirt field. One of our scouts found him and brought him to our academy. When he came to our academy, he was thrown right into the training, and the training went very well. Initially, he thrived. He did really, really well with the structure and the training. But after about 6 months, we started to see his body break down a little bit, right? Because his body did not have the strength to handle the rigor of the training, right? And this is something a lot of us are facing now because we're in times of great uncertainty. We're worried about our work. We're pushing ourselves, and we're trying to be more productive. But at the same time, we're noticing that our productivity may be going down because our body is breaking down. We're getting mentally tired. Our spirit is going down. And it's because the human body doesn't work at the same rate as productivity does, right? Productivity is dependent on the capacity of the human body. Right. And that's what was happening to Bienvenido. So he was breaking down. And therefore, as coaches, what we had to do is we had to create a routine for him that balanced out hard work with rest and recovery. We had to create a specific diet for him. We brought in specialists to do that. And we had to create a program for him, right? The thing is, there's a saying here in the West that says, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make him drink, right?
Right,
and what you've heard that before or something similar? Excellent.
No, the exact same thing, actually.
Excellent. And the reason I say that is that we can't force him to do anything that he didn't want to, right? we gave him the program. That's the best thing that we can give him, the best advice. But at the end of the day, every single morning when he woke up, he faced a choice. He could exhibit good shincho, good judgment, and be disciplined and follow a routine that made sense, that was good for him, that led him to his goals, or he could exhibit poor shincho and do things that led him astray, right? In the summer, I knew that during times of uncertainty and challenge, a very powerful mentality to always have is to practice good judgment, to always keep your eye on your goal and your purpose and your objective. And then you're more likely to make good decisions. And so what I feel is one of the best ways to do that is to practice discipline every day and establish a routine every day. And the most powerful routine, in my opinion, that you create starts the evening before, right? Starts the evening before. If you go to bed at a decent hour and then you get your 7 to 8 hours of sleep, then the next morning when you wake up, you're going to have the energy and the focus to be able to move forward at a good rate. But the night before, if you stay up late, you don't get enough sleep, the next morning, your day's essentially kiboshed, or you've hurt your day because you're starting with low energy, right? True. So your day starts the night before, wake up first thing in the morning, get some exercise in, right? And the reason why you exercise is to relax your body. It's like inoculating yourself against stress and anxiety, because one of the best ways to deal with stress and anxiety is through exercise. So why not do the exercise before the anxiety kicks in as a way to kind of inoculate yourself? And so the rest of your day, which may be filled with a lot of bad news, is better.
Yeah.
So that is Shincho. The fourth principle of Bushido is called Sessei. 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 And what Sessei means is to seek balance. And I don't have a big story behind this one, but this one is just about looking at evaluating your life and seeing where you are out of balance. Because when we're out of balance, the world, the universe, nature has a tendency to realize that we're out of balance and bring us back to balance. And usually the ride is not a very comfortable one, right? It's like, you're out of balance, boom, 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 boom.
Yeah.
And they come back. So I'll give you a few examples of where people are out of balance, right? Number one, productivity to recovery. Productivity to recovery. We spend so much time working, right? And focusing on getting ourselves out of the situation that we don't take time to let our bodies recover and rest and to be strong. And we have to do that, again, because you can't keep pushing your body and your mind at that high level all the time, because it eventually will break, right? It will eventually break. So cut back a little bit on your productivity, your hard work, make it better time, right? Less but better, and focus a little bit more time on some rest and recovery. Another area out of balance is physical activity, right? We're spending so much more time inactive, sitting. And there's an Eastern philosophy suggests that what moves lives, what doesn't move dies, right? So if you find yourself sitting all day in front of a computer, your body is essentially dying. I know that's a horrible thing to say. It's a bit of an exaggeration, but imagine that. And you want to balance that out, that inactivity, with physical activity. Even if you can't go outside, get up from your chair, move around, do a little bit of stretching. That's a very powerful way to seek balance there. Right. Another thing where you can seek balance is in terms of asking for help and giving help, right? Oftentimes in times of trouble, we find many people, and myself included from time to time, find ourselves asking people for help. Well, where can I go get help? What can someone do for me? What can I do for me because I'm in trouble? But sometimes it's one of those golden rules where if you help other people, help comes back, right?
Right.
So ask yourself, well, where can I help other people? And balance that out with of asking for help. Yeah, how about you? What do you think is an area where people are out of balance that you've seen?
Oh, I mean, I feel like you named the major ones that I have been feeling like have affected my life personally. I don't know. I think that a lot of people, like you said, work so hard that they forget to spend any time with themselves or with their family, or just, like personally develop their personal side because they're so focused in developing their professional side. I think that's an area that a lot of people lack balance in.
Absolutely. You kind of really hit it. We focus so much on the professional side, but we kind of forget that the vessel that carries us professionally ultimately is our capacity to do work, and our capacity to think, and our capacity to be driven. And that capacity is dependent on this. And if you think about all the great cultures in history and all the great areas of thought, it all comes back down to the notion of know thyself, conquer yourself, understand yourself. If you do that, then everything else will come into play. Now, I'm not
and I think
saying stop working hard. Of course you have to work hard. But at the same time, this is your vessel.
And I think that this time that we're in currently is, like a blessing in disguise, right? We have the time and the space and the energy to just do these things, to kind of find that balance, spend time with ourselves, spend time with our families, work out if we're not doing that already. Just kind of use the time a little wisely, and also learn that it's okay not to be productive sometimes, because your body might need the rest, or just need to be a little lazy sometimes. I think that it's just we have this opportunity, and we can use it.
Yep, absolutely. So I'll move forward. Then the fifth principle, I think I'm on the fifth one, is
fifth one, yes.
Seigi, S-E-I-G-I, and that means rectitude, or a sense of justice. Essentially, be honest, do the right thing, and that one's pretty self-explanatory. I don't want to go much further into that one, but essentially, look for areas or do your best to just be honest, do the right thing, stand up for what you believe in. That's the fifth principle of Bushido. The sixth principle of Bushido is called Jizen. And Jizen, J-I-Z-E-N, means benevolent. Benevolent, right? So I have an example for this one. In other words, help others. So I was, before all this happened, right? Before all this happened, when we were able to go out into public and go to different areas, I was at a copy center where I was making photocopies for a speaking engagement that I was about to give a big presentation in front of. It was actually the Bushido Code, a presentation that I give.
Okay.
And I was getting some handouts printed out, and the gentleman who worked on the other side of the counter, he asked me, "What are these handouts for?" And I said, "Well, they're a motivational presentation." And he said, "Oh, I should be a motivational speaker." And I was like, "Oh, okay, that's interesting. Why would you say that?" And he told me that he grew up in a part of the city that I live in, Chicago, that is very, very tough and very challenging. It's a very hard life part of the city. That's the best way I can describe it. And he spent his entire life trying to lead a good life, and as he said it, to try to stay out of jail. And he succeeded. He feels that now, as an adult, he was able to succeed and manage to lead a good life. And now his purpose was to make sure that his son and the other children in the neighborhood that he grew up in, where he still lives, lead a same type of life, where they're able to live a good life, to avoid crime and avoid going astray. And that was his purpose. And he said that in the neighborhood where he lived, there weren't that many good role models that could show these young people how to lead a good life. And so he found himself doing that all the time. And I said, well, that's very, very powerful. And it really made me think that when it comes to benevolence, being kind, right, helping others who are less fortunate, it doesn't necessarily mean giving them money. It doesn't mean just giving them things. You can also share with them wisdom and insights and experience that they may not have had the opportunity to learn themselves. And how we can all do that during these times of uncertainty, where we're kind of locked down and our main mode of communication is through the internet, is to use our social media posts, is to use social media in general to share our experiences, to share wisdom, tools, for no other reason than going, this might help somebody else that I know, part of my network, or someone who's never met me.
Yeah.
And it's a way to help, right? And it's also a great way to market yourself as well. I'll be honest with you.
Of course, yes. Yeah.
90% of your message, let's say, is this is I'm here to help you, right? These are some insights, some tools. I don't have any expectation, but the marketing comes from you saying, hey, look, I'm alive. I'm here. I'm trying to do something.
Yeah.
And that's going to work in people's minds, right?
Yeah, correct.
Good. So the last principle of Bushido is called Kibo. 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 And I feel this is probably the most powerful of all of them and the most important. And it means to have hope. To have hope for a better future, right? You got to imagine, this is something that the samurai warriors of ancient Japan were thinking and feeling during a time of a lot of violence, and a lot of war, and a lot of terrible things. So for them to say that, and for us to embrace that, it's very powerful. So a story behind that is this. During the Second World War, both of my grandparents were involved. Okay. On one side, in Japan, my Japanese grandfather, Hiroshi, at the beginning of the war, he flew supply missions throughout the islands of the South Pacific to help supply the Japanese army that was there on the islands. And then towards the end of the war, he trained kamikaze pilots on how to fly a one-way mission to protect the islands against the Americans who were coming, the American fleet that was coming. But then on the other side of the ocean, when the Japanese bombed Pearl Harbor, my American grandfather, Robert, like many brave young men and women of his generation, joined the Army, the 82nd Airborne, and he fought through Europe and Africa. And fortunately, they both survived the war, but they lost many, many friends. And it was a very, very terrible time. They both went back to their respective home countries at the end of the war, settled down and had families. About 20 years later, one of Hiroshi's daughters went to university in California, and one of Robert's sons went to that same university. They fell in love, got married, and moved to Canada, to a place called Edmonton. And in Canada, they had me. About 3 years later, although I was too young to remember it, my Japanese grandfather, Hiroshi, came over from Japan, and my American grandfather, Robert, came up from California, and they met for the first time in the backyard of my childhood home. And when they looked at their children and their children's children, they had a tremendous sense of kibo, a hope for a future that was better than the environment and the world that they grew up in, full of violence and conflict. And so the power of kibo is that we must always have hope for a better future. And the best way we can do that is to be the change we wish to see in the world. As Gandhi said, we be the change we wish in the world. Lead by example. And that's how we can have hope for the future, by being that hope. So those are the 7 principles. The last thing I kind of want to share with you is this last little insight. And it comes back to another time I was at a bookstore, because I love bookstores. Unfortunately, it doesn't look like I'm going to be to one anytime soon. But I was at a bookstore, and I came across a book called Yokojun. And Yokojun was written by a samurai doctor about 20 years after the Battle of Sekigahara. And it was essentially a health and lifestyle book, 300 pages. And I'll sum up those 300 pages for you, okay?
Okay.
Eat healthy, exercise, get plenty of sleep, right? This is written 400 years ago, right?
Yeah.
Does that sound familiar?
Yeah.
Right? It's the exact same stuff the health people today, the fitness people today are telling us to do now. And the reason why I share that with you is that it's so important to keep our eyes and our ears open to history, because history often has a chance to repeat itself. And it gives us wisdom and insights so that we can better navigate our times of uncertainty and challenge.
Right.
And so that 7 principles of
7 principles. Yeah. I think before we go any further, I'd like to tell our viewers that they can ask us questions in the comments, and I will read them out and you can answer those as well. So if you have any questions, do put them in the comments. We will try and answer those. Okay, so John, my second question to you is, how do you think that today, in the kind of situations that we are in, or even in general, how are people keeping themselves physically fit? I know that there's a lot of talk around that. There's a lot of there's like a trend of home workouts and just fitness, like home fitness and stuff like that. So how do you think that people are doing it, and do you have any suggestions around that?
Yeah, I have two suggestions. The first one is, what is more important than exercise? What is more important than exercise is physical activity and physical movement. I'll give you an
Right.
example. If you get 20 minutes of exercise in one particular day, right, the benefit of that is far less than getting up and moving throughout the course of your day as much as you possibly can, right? Because it's a
Right.
cumulative effect. And so a very important thing to think about is breaking up the time that you spend sitting and working,
Fitting.
right? Because that,
Yeah, because
go ahead.
it has been difficult since I've been home for the past over a month now, and I have this step counter on my phone. Yeah, it's a thing that my phones are always in my hand, but I barely get any steps in, so I have to do like an hour or hour and a half of workout every day just to feel like I have moved my body.
Sure.
So yeah, I think this thing of like standing up and walking every few minutes it's a good idea.
Well, yeah, sometimes that's not always practical. So here are a couple other tools. One of the reasons why you're feeling so uncomfortable and so blah is because you spend so much time sitting. And sitting is a very uncomfortable, unnatural position to place yourself in for prolonged periods of time. So what you can do is create essentially a standing desk. And you create a standing desk by just putting one table on top of another table or stacking some books on top of it. And so you place your laptop high so you're standing and working, right? Or you
Right.
put your laptop on the ground or your computer on the ground, lay down on your stomach, and type and work while you're in that position, right? So these
Oh, okay.
are different positions that you can place yourself in while you're at home. Another thing to think about is, if you have the opportunity, if you have a cell phone, take your, well, you probably do have, if you have a cell phone,
Yes.
walk and talk in your home, pace, right? If you have,
Uh-huh.
great. If not, have your video and just kind of do your conversations with your friends, your FaceTime calls, whatever they might be, while you're walking. Because then you're going to get
Right.
in, you're talking. And here's some other interesting information. Stanford University did some research recently, and they found that if you are trying to be creative while you're walking versus while you are sitting, your creativity is boosted by, I think it's 60%. Right? You have a 60% boost in creativity if you're trying to think and be creative while you're physically walking versus
Right.
stationary still. So your brain, what it's saying is that your brain is working better, right?
Yeah, of course.
If you're
Yeah.
physically moving.
Okay. So we have two questions here, John. One is by a guy called Gareth, and one is by Abrar. I think they're both pretty similar. Gareth asked, "How do I keep myself calm during this pandemic?" And Abrar asked, "What about mental health? Like, while we've spoken about physical health, what about mental health during the pandemic?"
Sure. So there's a couple of things that I would suggest with mental health. The first one is, stop looking at the news all day long, right?
Oh
That's
yeah.
one of the biggest challenges that we face. We're just bombarded by news. We don't need to look at it all day long. I would recommend looking at it first thing in the morning if you need to, but that's about it. Nothing really changes on a day-to-day basis, because every time you look at the news, essentially you're spiking your cortisol levels and your adrenaline levels. You're just freaking
Yeah.
yourself. And a lot of the debilitating effect that we feel from stress is a physical manifestation of what's happening in here, right? And so much of that is coming from what we're ingesting into our head, right? And so if we're constantly freaking ourselves out, scaring ourselves by looking at the news, and you have to remember, the news is important, right? But
Right.
they need to catch our attention. And oftentimes headlines are a little bit more, or often more, sensational than the actual information that it contains. So
Right.
if you're looking at headlines, you're just going to freak yourself out. So one of the best ways to control your mental health is to stop putting junk in it. Look at it like junk food. News, too much bad information is kind of like putting junk food in your mouth, but you're just putting it in through your head. That's first tactic. Second tactic, I am a big proponent of, is And I'll tell you a little story about myself. If I look at the news, I used to look at the news a lot when I was younger. I would always freak myself out. And then when I look at the news, I'm like, oh, the world is going to an end. I'm depressed. I'm just going to go to sleep for the rest of the day. What's the point, right?
Yeah.
And then, or what I would do is I would go for a run, or I'd go do some exercise, so that the endorphins in my brain would kick in, right? The endorphin hormone would kick in, the dopamine, and I would feel better about myself, right? Because I would inoculate myself from that stress and anxiety, right? And so I would feel better. And so what I realized is, okay, why don't I just put that stress, that inoculation at the beginning of my day? So I do exercise at the beginning of the day, move my body so that the dopamine and the endorphins kick in. And so all the stress that I pick up throughout the course of the day, the negative stuff, is a little less, right? It's not as potent, powerful. And so those are two tactics you can do. And then there's always different types of breathing techniques that you can incorporate. One technique is the 4-box breathing. And this is something that people in the United States military use, many of them. And it's breathing in for a count of 4 seconds and breathing out for a count of 4 seconds, nice and deep, 4 times through. That's one way that you can kind of calm your system. And what that does is it calms your nervous system. It engages what's called your parasympathetic nervous system and relaxes your sympathetic nervous system. So
and I can tell people that it does work, because before we started this live, I was a little nervous about coming on, and John told me to do this breathing thing, and it did work. It did kind of calm me down. So yeah, I'm sure that'll help a lot of people.
Right. Good.
Okay, so John, earlier when we were talking, you said something about the spirit, strengthening our spirit. What did you mean by that?
It's channeling our spirit, meaning our resolve, right? What pushes us forward is our resolve to make a difference, right? I mentioned earlier about routine and discipline, but sometimes willpower isn't enough, right? Just having sheer will. But when you have a purpose, when other people are depending on you, right, that becomes a powerful motivator. And when I say it becomes a powerful motivator, that motivator boosts your spirit, your resolve to do what you need to do. Like for example, every morning or most mornings, I put up some sort of social media post for my network. And I do that because I feel that they're relying on me, or many of them are relying on me, to be able to give them some sort of motivation or inspiration or some useful advice. And that gets me up at 4 o'clock in the morning to get the content created for the time that they wake up. If I didn't feel like those people were there, I may not necessarily always do it. But that's my purpose. And that's what boosts my spirits to get up, even if I'm feeling a little groggy or if I'm feeling a little bit down. Because no one at the end of the day is always going to be up, right?
Right.
Not always going to be up.
Yeah. Okay, so we have another question by Nidhi. She says, how do we develop determination and focus when work seems so uncertain?
Can you repeat that question one more time, please?
How do we develop determination and focus when work seems so uncertain?
You have to focus on developing who you are, what you want. Get a clear definition or a picture of what your purpose is in life. What is that one thing that you want to accomplish in your life? Who do you want to be? Spend time answering that question, because that, in the end, just like everything else in life, this too shall pass. Because if you think about it, oftentimes we refer to World War I, World War II, different global pandemics we've had, things here like the Spanish flu. The world that all of us were born into was a world that came after those terrible events, right? And the world that we were born into wasn't that bad, right? It was relatively decent, despite all those horrible things happening. And so history is going to continue moving forward. This too shall pass. There's going to be a new world. It's going to be very, very different. But we have to realize that this too shall pass. And if we focus on ourselves developing this, we will be ready for what comes next, or we'll be better prepared, right?
Right. Thank you. Okay, so moving on, I have another question for you. You've talked about developing ourselves physically, mentally, and spiritually. I remember you mentioning in our discussions earlier something about a fourth pillar about professional development.
Yes,
So could you elaborate a little bit about that?
sure. Part of my career was spent as a fitness trainer, right? I spent about
Right, yeah.
12 years as a fitness trainer. And one of my concerns was, or one of the realities that came from that is everyone thought that that's what I cared about. I just cared about the body. I just cared about aesthetics. I just cared that, being fit is everything. But
Yeah,
it's not. I've always believed that physical fitness, is a crucial component that helps you become who you need to be to make the change that you need to make in the world, right? And so fitness is one pillar. Your professional competence, your professional expertise is another one of those four pillars because it is so crucial. This is the difference that you're going to make in the world, right? So on the one hand, yes, develop yourself physically, mentally, spiritually, but at the same time, develop yourself professionally. All four go hand in hand. There's a balance between all four. And the professionally goes to the concept of Shina, which is to strengthen your skills. Because I'm a firm believer that every single person in this world has something to contribute, right? But unless you are doing something to hone your skills, unless you're constantly doing something to develop those skills, you're going to become obsolete and you're not going to be able to be competitive and make a difference. I'm a big believer in being positive, but at the same time, pragmatic. Yes, focus your body, mind, and spirit, but that's not going to take you the distance. You have to be good at what you do professionally. So focus on developing that as well, knowing that the professional aspect of you also depends on the strength of your body, the strength of your mental clarity, and your resolve, your spirit.
Yeah. Similar to something you said earlier, right, about having hope and being positive, we need to have those things, but we also need to be realistic about the situations that we're in. Yeah, I think that's really important in today's day and age, especially. So, John, since we've been talking a lot about all these stories that you've been telling us, tell us a little bit about how your day looks like right now when you're in lockdown at the same time as all of us.
So my day starts at 4 a.m. in the morning. I get up, and between 4 a.m. and 4:30 a.m., I'm in a fight with myself to get out the door. Because fortunately, where I live, at 4:30 in the morning, there's really nobody outside. And so I can go for a little bit of a jog in these areas where there's nobody is at, right? So I'll go for about a 6-mile run from 4:30 to 5:30. During that time, I use that as a meditation where I'm thinking about the social media post that I'm going to put up, the video or the something that I'm going to write about. Once I get back around 5:30 to 4:35. After that, I make my video, and then the rest of the day I spend reaching out to previous clients that I've worked with. I focus on honing my skills in terms of some classes that I'm taking on the platform Udemy. I'll be very straightforward. My background, I had really no background in video editing, no background in copywriting, any of those things. But those, like you, Rewa, those are skills that I realized that I needed to take advantage of in order to adapt to the changing circumstances, right? Because the career that I was doing prior to this was where I stood up in front of an audience of 300, 400, 500 people and gave a presentation. That's changed completely, and I'm anticipating that that's not going to come back for a year and a half, 2 years, if ever, to the way it used to be. And so this is the platform, and so I spend some time learning those skills. And I'll be honest, I'll watch a couple of TV shows because I do like it. Stretch, and that's kind of it. And then I go to bed 8:30, 9 o'clock. And the reason why I get up early, again, and I can't stress this enough, and this is for people who have families as well as people who are by themselves, those early hours of the morning is very peaceful. A lot of the craziness of the day hasn't really kicked in yet, and it gives you an opportunity, A, to think about what you're going to do during the day. B, get your exercise in if that's what you want to do. C, meditate or do whatever it is that you do without everything else kind of coming in on you. From my perspective, getting out and getting my physical activity at 4:30 to 5:30 is good because there's no one out there. It's safer, right? I would much rather go out later, but it doesn't make any sense because I'm trying to with a good judgment and social distance, you know?
Right. Okay, so we have another question here. It says, in your opinion, is the COVID-19 an obstacle for growth or an opportunity for us to redefine ourselves and our success? So is it basically an obstacle or an opportunity? I think that's basically the question.
It's funny, I was watching a video by a gentleman named Tony Robbins the other day, and it really reaffirmed what I believe is that obstacles, depending on how you look at them, it depends on your framework, can be a gift
Opportunity,
and a
yeah.
right? But at the same time, I don't want to be naive and say, you know what, all problems are great, because there are some problems that are absolutely horrible, right? But if you have the luxury to be able to be in an environment, to live in the circumstances where you can actually use this time, not just to survive. You're not hunting for food. You're not desperate for pure survival. Then you're fortunate, right? And then you can use this time, and it's on you. It's your onus to use this time to your advantage, not to just relax and waste it. Look at it as an opportunity for complete transformation. When I was a kid, I used to play these video games. And one of the great things about video games is that if you were losing, you could always press reset. And then you can
Oh, did you do that?
well, in life, it's not that easy. It's impossible. But what COVID-19 has done for many, and again, please accept this is looking at it from the perspective of people who have the opportunity and the good fortune to be able to look at it in such a way, to look at it as an opportunity to press reset and change the direction of where your life is, right? And that comes down to what you do on a daily basis. Because there's this notion that the most important day of your life is today. And the reason why it's the most important is because a life is just a sum of the days, right? So if you live each day as best as you can, then you increase your chances to lead and have a good life.
True. Yeah.
So today, and just where you are today is a sum action of every decision you've made in the past, right?
Yeah,
so
of course.
You can change the trajectory many times of your life, but that comes from here, and your mind, your body, and your spirit, right?
Right.
My father was telling me the other day, another thing to be grateful for is your health. If you have your health, right? If you have a clear mindset, right? Then you have the basic necessities to do what you want to do and to transform your life. As long as you have your health and your mindset, you have that. Be grateful for that. Sure, a lot of things are going bad, but always remember, it can always be worse. It can always be worse. Right? It's
and not only that, I think when we make decisions or when we're in different situations, I think it's so important to understand that if it's not going our way, to kind of reevaluate it and look at it from a different perspective. Because I know personally for me, I have made a lot of decisions in my life that if I sit and think about now, and I'm not saying my life is really long, but just in this short time, I can sit and I can regret them and I can cry about them and I can feel bad about them, or I can look at it in a manner that, oh, what did it teach me? Or what good did I get out of it? And I think it helps you, make peace with yourself a lot more as well if you do that.
Absolutely. And there's a term for it, it's called the growth mindset. Not everybody has it, but it's just dependent on where you are in your evolution of your life, right? And it's not necessarily looking at the glass as being half full or half empty.
Yeah.
It's looking at, okay, this is the reality. I'm going to be pragmatic about the situation. What's the best case scenario that I can get out of this? What can I do with this? Something else I'd like to add is the notion that, we can't be naive and think that every day is going to be a good day and we can do everything wrong. And so there's this notion of some days you have to be the rock. Some days you need a rock.
True.
That means sometimes your friends are going to need you, right? Others are going to need you to be strong. And that's, if I look back at everything in my life that I've learned, very little of it has come from something someone has actually told me, right?
Yeah.
Do this, do that, do this. No, it's come from what I've observed, right? What I've observed, the behavior of other people. And so by you every single day, not giving up and trying to do your best, even though you're human and you're fallible and you keep pushing forward, that's going to inspire me. And if you know that, and if you know that there are people in your world that you may not even know who are looking at your actions on social media or indirectly, you're going to be helping them. That can help you with the motivation to keep pushing forward because you are helping other people. And then there are other times where you're like, oh, this is awful. I can't do it.
I mean,
right?
I think our best is different on different days, and it's okay to have those moments of I don't want to do anything, and I would just want to sit and watch Netflix all day. I think it's okay to have that as well.
Absolutely, it's balance, right? There's a saying that if you only had good days, then technically you would never have any good days because all days would be exactly the same.
Would be the same, yeah.
Contrast is what makes life
interesting. Yeah. So would you like to tell our viewers a little bit about communication? I know that you have a background in that as well. So would you want to say something about that?
Sure. Under the fourth pillar that I talk about professionalism, I feel that communication or being able to communicate effectively with other people is so crucial because, okay, on the one hand, I talked about physical, mental, and spiritual, right? That's developing yourself. Great. You developed yourself. It's strong. It's powerful. It's working effectively. Now you have to be able to create the channel with which you interact with the world around you, and that is your ability to communicate effectively, to get what's in your head through the air using the tools that are available to you, which is the words you speak, the gestures you have, as well as the technical tools that you have to get that message into the mind of other people. And that doesn't come naturally, right? There's a difference between talking and being able to effectively communicate. And now,
correct.
And so I think that's a very powerful tool to develop. And you develop it, you can take courses on it. But one of the other most powerful ways that I would recommend you all try doing it is to make videos, right? Make videos to share with your network that are between 30 and 60 seconds long, where you share with them an insight. And it's great for business. It's great for if you're a student and you're looking to make an introduction to a potential employer. Why send a text email when you can send a video, a personalized message? But if you don't practice before you do it, really, really badly, right? You're going to be, and if you limit it to, let's say, 30 to 60 seconds, that's going to force you to become very concise in how you communicate your message, right? So there's 3 ways that I recommend you communicate: clear, concise, and confident. Remember those 3 words: clear, concise, and confident. You remember those 3 things in anything that you do communication-wise, you're going to be much more effective. I'll add one more thing in terms of communicating. Let's say you're doing a webinar, something along those lines. Speak in a conversational tone, right? Don't turn into like some crazy person. Number 2, be authentic. So be yourself, right? Don't turn into somebody else. And number 3, use specific tools or learn specific tools that will help you amplify or raise the volume on who you already are. Right? So maybe you have to speak a little bit louder. Maybe you have to use your facial gestures a little bit more. But at the core of it, just be yourself. Because oftentimes when we think about it, people transform when they're communicating, right? You'll see someone who with their friends, they're jovial, they're talking like this, and then comes to business. Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
And they transform into somebody that they're not, right?
True.
Be yourself. You'll be happier for it. The spirit will be much stronger, and people can see that. And they're gonna. And from a communications perspective, that becomes very powerful connection, right? Because people don't like fake people. So that's communication.
All right, I think that brings us almost to the end of our live session today. Do you have anything that you'd want to tell our viewers, like a message or something? And also, if anybody has any more questions, do send them in. We are still answering. We have a little bit of time, so we can answer those.
I guess the last message that I'd love to give to everyone is that it's just so very important if you have the luxury and the opportunity and the time to spend this time to develop your most important tool, and that's who you are. And you do that by first figuring out who you are, what you want to be, and what you want to accomplish. It's your purpose. I'm not talking about your passion. What is your purpose? You know, at the end of your life, what do you want to look back on and be happy about that you were able to do during this lifetime? Was it to raise a great family? Would it be to be a great friend? Would it be to contribute to artificial intelligence that makes humanity better? Whatever it might be, figure out what that purpose is. And it's not an easy question. It took me 20 years to come up with that question. Start it now, right? Number two, never take your body for granted, right? It's like if you have a car and you drive it hard every single day, it will break down. And when it breaks down, it's not going to move. And for humans, if our car breaks down, it can be really, really bad, right? We're in the hospital, we have all these horrible diseases, and things are just horrible. So you can take care of that by just making small actions every single day to take care of it. The mind, keep this clear and focused, right? Don't look at the news every single day. In fact, I would recommend, if you can, look at the news at the end of every week versus every single day, if you can. And the reason why I say that is this. Every single day, news organizations are forced to put out new content so they keep their viewership, right? But oftentimes this content isn't as well thought out. But at the end of the week, they have the whole last week to kind of check back on, kind of get a bigger picture, sky-high view of what's going on, and you have a better understanding and perspective of what is going on. And I would also challenge you to look at the newspapers from other countries, because generally I find that when you look at newspapers from other countries, they're less biased, right? Because they're going to have less. And then third, keep cultivating your spirit, and that comes back down to your purpose. There's a fourth one, the professional side. Keep honing your skills, right? The samurai always believed that it was very important, like a carpenter, to keep your tools, as they say, whetted, sharp, because you never know when you're going to need them.
True. We have one question that says, how many hours of sleep do you get if you wake up at 4? Well, I think you answered that, didn't you? You said you go to bed around 9 or 10?
No, I go to bed usually around 8:30, 9 o'clock. So 7.
Oh,
7
yeah.
Yeah. There's no reason for me to stay up late in the evening. I used to, but I realized that my productivity was waning. So why not wake up early? And again, this isn't for everybody. Right?
Yeah, because I know that personally for me, I am more productive in the later half of the day than I am in the first half of the day. And I found for years, people have told me, no, you should do it in the morning and you should wake up early. And it just doesn't seem to work for me. And I'm not saying I need to wake up at 4 in the evening, but I also think that I try and keep all my high energy activities towards the later half of the day, just because that's when I have the energy. So I don't think that it applies to everybody the same way. But
you're right. It does not. The point of it is, well, that answer was someone asked what my routine was. Right?
Yes, of course, yeah.
And I also gave a bit of a recommendation, but at the same time, I'll say that everybody is different. The key takeaway from it is to create a routine and structure, right? And the other thing I would take away from it is not to take any piece of information or guidance from anybody as gospel, as this is the way you do it. Take pieces of information that you find that's valuable, that can enhance you, and ignore the rest, right? The Bushido Code, I don't follow everything in the Bushido Code every single day. I have principles. Bushido Code mirror it. Most cultures in the world have the principles that are very similar to it. But those principles help me make better decisions, right? And that's the whole purpose of sharing the Bushido Code, is to start looking at your decisions and how you look at life through the perspective of underlying principles, because that helps clarify how you think and how you make decisions.
Right. Okay, so I think we are ready to end the session today. Just before we end, I think I should let you all know that day after tomorrow, which is 30th of April, TLR is doing another session between 5:30 and 6:30. So if you're interested, do log in. If you have any more questions, I think John is more than happy to answer them. So put them in the comments and he'll get to them. Stay at home, stay safe, stay happy and healthy. And thank you all for watching today. Bye. Bye, John. It was nice talking to you.
Bye, everyone. Thank you
Bye.
for your time, Rion.